Hi, welcome to Prime Recap. A pact made by his father causes several parts of his body to be stolen by 48 demons. To get them back, he must start a long journey and eliminate each of these monsters. Today we will recap the story of Dororo, from 2007. In the year 3084, in the far east of the planet, a war is taking place that has claimed thousands of lives for decades. As the survival of the population was threatened, Kagemitsu Daigo, the lord of those lands, decides to claim the demons for help. He then heads to a warehouse, where 48 demonic statues were hidden. Lord Daigo asks the monk to leave him alone with those creatures. The man informs the spirits that both his father and brothers were killed in the war against Kanayama. If nothing was done, his entire lineage would be wiped off the face of the earth, so Daigo asks the demons to help him exterminate his enemies and asks what they want to receive in return. Suddenly, a mouse approaches and the man cuts it in half with his sword. What he didn't expect was that the animal would start talking. The possessed rat says that in exchange for this favor, the demons wanted the body of his son, who was about to be born. Daigo accepts the deal and states that, as payment for receiving the power to exterminate his enemies, each of those creatures of darkness could keep a part of the body of his firstborn. To seal that deal, a strong lightning bolt is sent from the heavens and falls on the warrior's head, leaving a mark on his forehead. The poor monk arrives just in time and discovers that Daigo had made a pact with the demons. To prevent this information from being leaked, he must eliminate the old man. 20 years have passed since then and a mysterious young man approaches a small village. There was an orphan girl living on the streets pretending to be a boy. Since she was alone as a child, she has to commit petty thefts to survive. Meanwhile, the hooded boy enters one of the bars in search of his prey. During the dance performance, a masked woman appears and he makes his way to the stage. Some security guards try to stop him, but the man manages to knock them all down. A swordsman decides to confront him, but the guy uses his own arm to block the attack. However, his limb is torn off and a blade appears in its place. The boy then hits the swordsman a few blows and uses his blade to break the mask that was hiding the woman's true face. At that moment, everyone realizes that this was a demon disguised as a human. Then the monster, which looks more like a giant evil crab, attacks the boy and tries to eliminate him with its long claws. When the creature finally manages to hit him, the young man's body regenerates. The orphan girl was passing by and sees several people running away from the bar. Curious, she enters the place to find out what all the commotion is about and takes the opportunity to hide from some guys who were chasing her, because the girl had stolen all their money. As she does so, she is able to witness the exact moment when the boy rips the demon's head off with the blade embedded in its body. As he was retrieving one of his arms, the creature's entire body explodes. Soon after, one of the men who was looking for the girl shows up at the bar and tries to force her to return his money. At that moment, he is distracted by seeing the warrior regenerating his left arm. As he walks out of the bar, he falls to the ground and something bizarre happens. A prosthesis comes off his leg and a new limb is born there. When this happens, the prosthesis falls apart and turns to dust. Upon witnessing this scene, both the young woman and the man who was chasing her are frightened and try to run away. But the mysterious boy slowly approaches and asks what he looks like after gouging out his own eye. The two intruders finally manage to get out of that place and try to hide from the aberration, but the young woman takes the opportunity to strike her pursuer and goes after an old man to get more information regarding the demon exterminator. He tells how, 20 years ago, there was a sorcerer who sought to perfect his magic. While gathering medicinal herbs by the side of a stream, he spotted a wooden bowl floating by. When he managed to pull the object out of the water, he found a creature without any limbs wrapped in a piece of cloth. By some miracle, that thing had managed to survive even without its limbs and most of its organs, so the man took it to his home and decided to help it to continue living. He discovered that this was actually a human baby, and the sorcerer decided to give him a body so that it could move around. So the man traveled to a village that had been demolished by the war and collected some bodies of children who had died. He boiled the bodies and mixed them with his secret medicinal herbs. In this way he was able to create the water that is the source of life for those children. Then he applied electricity to it to make the first heart. After that, and in this same way, he also created the other parts that were missing and sewed them all onto the baby. Sometime later, this old man who's telling the story went to the sorcerer's house, where he was met by demons in children's bodies. He hands the sorcerer a sword and says that the boy will need it in the future, because the weapon was forged to kill demons. That same night, the old man leaves, and after using electricity one more time, the child manages to get up. The sorcerer then inserts the blades into the boy's arms and uses prosthetics made from human bodies to cover them. When the boy became a little older, the man began to train him to fight. The child's mental powers were able to compensate for his lack of sight and hearing. Years later, while the young man was in the field harvesting medicinal herbs, the sorcerer became ill and eventually passed away. However, before he died, he asked his son to burn that place, because if his techniques got into Daigo's hands, the Lord could have an immortal body and all the people the magician helped during his life would become victims of the war and the whole world would become a carnage. After setting the house on fire, the young man hears a voice coming from among the rubble. This voice tells him about the 48 demons that have stolen his body parts, and that in order to get his limbs back he must kill the demons that stole them with the blade that is stuck in his left arm. The voice ends by saying that if the young man decides to look for the demons, he will find them naturally because the stolen parts will call for each other. After hearing the story of the boy's past, the orphan girl decides to accompany him in his search for the missing parts of his body. She asks the young man his name, however, he says that she needs to introduce herself first if she wants to know someone's name. At this point, the girl reveals that she doesn't have a name and the man states that he doesn't have a real name either, but everyone who knows him calls him Hyakkimaru. The orphan then says that he can call her Dororo, because that seemed like a perfect nickname for a thief. Although Hyakkimaru tries to stop the girl from following him, she remains determined to go after him and ends up defeating the boy with her insistence. While resting by a stream, a giant demon baby appears and Hyakkimaru accompanies it to the wreckage of a temple that had been burned down. While playing with the spirit, the boy reveals that the thing was made of the souls of dozens of children who had been burned in that place. A few hours later, after taking a nap, Dororo wakes up when she hears some voices. Hyakkimaru gets up immediately and realizes that this couple was bringing offerings to the children who had been killed in that temple. Those were the parents of some of the children who were burned. They abandoned their own children in that place while fleeing from the war, and Dororo says that this attitude is unforgivable. After throwing away the offering, she makes her way through the forest. Hyakkimaru follows her and soon they find the lord of those lands riding his horse. He offers his mansion so that the young people can rest and says that he would love to hear stories about their travels. When they arrive at the house, they find the man's wife and his 7 daughters, all dressed as Japanese dolls. After dinner, the 2 youngsters get ready for bed. Meanwhile, the twins were organizing themselves to decide which one of them they would devour first. After transforming into disgusting larvae, they crawl to the door of their visitors' rooms. The monsters gather around Dororo, but Hyakkimaru was already waiting for them and was ready to face them. When the girl wakes up, the maggots had already been destroyed and the spirit of the children who had been burned was outside the house pointing out where they should go. In the warehouse, the youngsters find a secret passage that leads them to an underground room. There they find human bones and soon realize that those were the remains of the missing children. Hyakkimaru finds dozens of monster eggs similar to those caterpillars that had attacked them. They continue exploring that place and spot a ladder that takes them back to the surface. The boy suspects that the host's wife is a demon who disguised herself as a monk and took in children when their parents abandoned them during the war. Then she would take the children to that house and use their bodies to feed her children. Upon finding out what has happened, the demon woman asks her husband to eliminate those outsiders. Just then, Hyakkimaru arrives at the couple's room and tries to get the man to leave his demon wife, because ultimately she would take everything from him, even his soul. Meanwhile, Dororo goes to the nearest village and shows the villagers the true identity of the monk with whom they left their children. The girl reveals that those children, in fact, were serving as food for the children of the demon that inhabited those lands. Finally, she asks the peasants to take their weapons and follow her to destroy the evil monster. While trying to convince the poor man to stop helping the demon, the woman takes the sword and uses it to go through the chest of the boy and her husband. That was the tragic end of that man. But Hyakkimaru was there to avenge him and to avenge all the children who were victims of that monster. A new battle ensues and the demon reveals his true form. When he tries to escape, the spirit of the children appears and separates to go after him. They bring the demon down as it tries to escape through the skies, and as soon as it gets close to the ground, Hyakkimaru uses his cursed sword to cut it in half. Once again, when Dororo appears to help him, the job is already done. The villagers nearby destroy all the remaining eggs and larvae, and at that moment they can see the spirits of their children being released. At the end of the battle, Hyakkimaru gets his liver back and expels the organ implanted by his adoptive father. When this happens, the peasants realize that the boy is no ordinary human and begin to drive them out of the village. As their mission in that place had already come to an end, the youngsters prepare to embark on yet another adventure. As they were walking through the forest, a new monster appeared in their path. The creatures were getting weirder and weirder. This time they had to face a cursed tree with a human head. The creature surrounds Hyakkimaru's body with its giant hair and tries to crush him, but the boy manages to break free. The demon hides inside the trunk of a tree, but Hyakkimaru manages to cut it in half with his blade and thus regains his left ear. A few days later, they must face a giant demon lizard, which had no arms. The animal uses its tongue to knock them down and jumps on top of the boy in an attempt to crush him. Dororo manages to rescue him, but the lizard does not give up his hunt. It uses its disgusting tongue to capture the boy and swings him from side to side. Finally, he brings it to his mouth and tries to devour it, but the girl uses her knife to pierce the demon's eyes and free her friend. Hyakkimaru manages to cut off the animal's tongue, but it still gets up to continue the battle. Since its skin was extremely thick, and therefore difficult to pierce, the young man decides to enter the monster's mouth and cut it open from the inside. When the fight comes to an end, Hyakkimaru manages to recover his vocal cords and is extremely happy to finally be able to hear his own voice. The next monster is a hawk demon with whom the boy fights a mid-flight battle. As he was at a disadvantage, he takes a good beating. First he is knocked off the demon's back, then he tries to hit him with a giant rock. Finally, it knocks him off a cliff, but Hyakkimaru uses his blade to stop the fall. Just as he was about to be knocked down, Dororo hits a rock on the monster's head and ends up being chased off. At this point, the boy manages to reach him and strikes several blows to his face. When he finally manages to cut the creature with his sword, the demon says something that puzzles the boy. He says that if he wants to hate someone, let it be his father. Right after saying this, his body explodes, leaving Hyakkimaru full of questions and with a new right arm. A few kilometers ahead, they reach the ruins of the old border between the Kaneyama territory and the Daigo family territory. From afar, they could see Daigo's gigantic castle, and Dororo reveals that it was that man's soldiers who killed her parents. The girl remembers the day her village was massacred by soldiers, who suspected that her people were conspiring against Daigo's reign. Dororo and her mother watched the whole thing while in hiding and saw her father brutally executed, with 2 arrows crossing his head. The girl and her mother were the only survivors of the village and had to wander in search of food. Her mother said that from that day on she would be a strong boy until the day she met a real man, like her father. When this happened, then she could become a woman. A few weeks later, her mother died, and the young woman had to go her own way. As revenge for the death of her parents, Dororo promises that she will hunt down and eliminate every member of that family. Since his right arm had been recovered, Hyakkimaru uses the debris from the war to assemble a sword with his blade. Soon after, 3 of Daigo's servants approach him to interrogate him. Dororo acts hostile and the men threaten to cut her neck. Hyakkimaru then kicks one of the skulls that were lying on the ground and hits the soldier. The girl takes the opportunity to pierce the feet of one of those men with her knife while the boy immobilizes the second soldier. Next, Dororo goes after the servant who was trying to recover his sword and kicks him a few times. The man ends up right in front of the young man. And when he tries to attack him, he takes a single blow and faints. Dororo takes the sword from one of those soldiers, but decides to let them live. The duo heads to the village and tries to infiltrate the villagers, but shortly after Hyakkimaru gets into a fight and is noticed by Tahomaru, Daigo's son, who invites him to the castle. He then invites him to join his army and fight for his country. He then intends to take him to meet his father, but his mother crosses his path and he takes the opportunity to introduce her to a possible new member of his army. The woman approaches the boy and asks him where he got the piece of cloth he was carrying around his neck. As he touches her hands, he has a vision of the day his mother abandoned him at the lake in a wooden basket. Her husband had forced her to get rid of that child, and the woman had no choice. In this way, Hyakkimaru discovers that he is in fact Daigo's firstborn son. She then starts calling him Tahomaru and faints. Her youngest son tries to help her and Hyakkimaru takes the opportunity to get out of the place. Later, the boy's mother tries to explain to her husband that their firstborn had returned, but the man refuses to believe her and claims that his wife is delusional. Later, Dororo meets her traveling partner on the banks of a stream and he informs her that he is Kagemitsu Daigo's son. The young woman doesn't believe him, so the boy asks her to take his hand and shows her everything that happened in the castle. He asks Dororo to kill him, since he has vowed to eliminate all members of the Daigo clan. As she remains unresponsive, Hyakkimaru leaves and promises that he will never appear before her again. But Dororo runs after him and stabs him in the back. Just then, the old man who has followed the boy's entire story suddenly appears and reveals the deal Daigo made with the demons in exchange for his son's body. Hyakkimaru states that he wishes to cut his real father's body into 48 parts so that he can suffer something close to what he suffered, but Dororo forbids him from doing so. According to her, no matter what happens, he could not kill his own father. A few hours later, 2 new monsters appear and attack the boy. They looked like rabid dogs in search of their prey, but Hyakkimaru soon manages to destroy them with his blade forged for killing demons. In this way, his two eyes return to his body and the boy can see for the first time. At that instant, Dororo approaches and states that she will give up her revenge against the Daigo clan and asks the boy to do the same. Next morning, Maru gathers his men and goes in search of his brother. Meanwhile, Daigo complains to the demons that, despite having made a pact with them 20 years ago, his country was still at war. One of the monsters then reveals that the cause of this is the fact that his firstborn, whom he had handed over to the demons, is still alive. Upon hearing this, he also decides to go after the boy to finish what should have been done at the moment he was born. When they least expect it, the pair end up being bombarded by Maru's soldiers. Hyakkimaru has the old man take Dororo away from that place while he gets rid of those men. A second bomb is dropped, but the young man manages to dodge it. Before he realizes it, he is surrounded by soldiers and his brother, who is determined to kill him. They exchange a few blows, but Hyakkimaru's goal is to get his brother to give up that idea. However, he does not succeed. They continue the battle until two of the soldiers end up accidentally killing each other. The two brothers get into an intense sword fight and the third soldier approaches to stab him, but his sword is broken and he is eventually killed in battle. Suddenly, the boy's mother arrives at the ruins to find her youngest with a blade in his neck. The blade that had come loose from the soldier's sword accidentally ended up in the boy's neck. After verifying that her son was really dead, the woman takes a knife and threatens Hyakkimaru. But everything changes when Daigo arrives on the scene and she decides to protect her firstborn from her husband's wrath. However, without any remorse, the man draws his sword and kills his wife. Hyakkimaru becomes enraged and walks towards him to kill him. Dororo tries to stop him, but the boy strikes her, causing the girl to faint. The battle ensues and both are determined to eliminate their opponent. Daigo is badly wounded and is one step away from losing the fight, but he still says that he does not regret selling his son's body to the demons. The man makes one last attempt to eliminate the boy, but ends up with a sword about to cut his neck. However, Hyakkimaru looks at Dororo and says that if she could abandon her hatred, he would also abandon his. Apparently, that battle had come to an end, but suddenly Maru's body begins to move, and a demon promises to bring him back to life if Daigo hands over his body. Hyakkimaru tries to make him not accept the exchange, but the man is determined to get his son back, so he accepts the deal. As he does so, a dark demon rises from the sky and devours his head. Then a new head appears and his body is controlled by the demon. As agreed, Maru comes back to life and watches as the demon threatens to take over the entire city. When he climbs onto Daigo's horse, the monster pierces his own belly with his sword. For an instant, the Lord manages to regain control of his body and asks Hyakkimaru to kill him so that the demon can be eliminated along with him. And this is exactly what the young man does. Before he dies, Daigo orders Maru to lead his nation and asks Dororo to take care of Hyakkimaru. Seconds later, the army arrives on the scene, but Maru orders them to stay away. At that moment, the young man finally gets his heart back. In the castle, Maru asks his brother to inherit his father's throne, because he did not feel ready to face such a responsibility. However, Hyakkimaru says that he has yet to recover half of the parts of his body that were stolen, and until he finishes this mission, he cannot devote himself to anything else. Maru then assures him that he will wait for his older brother, for that nation was rightfully his. Finally, he hands him his father's sword and Hyakkimaru goes to meet with Dororo. When she arrives at the ruins on the border between the towns, the girl is surprised to find her partner, as she believed the boy would remain on her father's land. She is thrilled to realize that she won't be alone again and goes to hug him, but as she approaches the young man, she lands a kick between his legs and warns him not to let his guard down. Apparently, despite all this journey, the girl was still the same Dororo that Hyakkimaru had met months ago. Together, they continue their adventure in search of the other 24 remaining parts. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, please like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.